first question for me is we've got a new season upon us soon. And so we're going to have a bunch of kids who are going into new teams and new environments. So you experienced that as a player yourself, not only new environments within teams that you played on, but new countries as well. So just talk through kind of that process a little bit, how to get acclimated to a new team, maybe different things, different approaches that you saw worked or worked for you or helped you out, or maybe things you see within your own kids and new players that you bring into your team.
I think looking at it the way I had as a player, I think being open-minded is the best thing that you can do, right? Like, because if we looking back at my career and our career with Tata, coming from Germany, where everything is so like, not 2 versus 1 in the back and like some tactical things that was so different from what I've seen before in my entire career. In the first few weeks, I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. So you're like little bit still stuck in your own little bubble that you know from before. But once you start being open-minded to new ideas, and then all of a sudden you grow into those moments, you develop like your own little idea within that. And next thing you know, you trust it. And now all of a sudden it becomes successful. So being open-minded, not just on the field, also off the field. Like when you go into a locker room, just like be open-minded to the people that are there, because the beauty of this sport is it makes strangers into friends. And it's like you walk into a locker room, but people come from all kinds of different societies, all different areas of the world. And just being open-minded and listen sometimes is one thing that I always felt like it gives you a lot, just being open-minded.
Totally. I completely agree with listening more than you talk, especially when you're in a new environment. And I thought the same thing playing under Tata. Like I was in my 30s already and played for a bunch of different coaches, and everything was so new, not only the language side of things, but like you said, the tactical side of things. And, just learned so much that I didn't think I would learn that late in my career from such a new perspective. So yeah, awesome stuff.
Yeah, that's from the coach's side. And if you look at the players that you go into, sometimes it's good to, maybe you need those 2-3 pillars of experienced guys that have been with the club for a little bit longer, players that you maybe know from before. And if you just follow them a little bit and just stick to them at first, they might open some doors to other areas of the team, other areas of the club. And now you grow into that new environment and it gets faster. You don't want to be isolated for too long, especially in a team environment.
I love how you said that, Kevin, because I just remember sometimes even hearing from you guys and hearing from you, Parky, and some of you guys just asking me, hey, are these training sessions normal? Are these things you guys do in South America? And I just remember looking at both of you guys and saying, these are very normal and this is what they do. And that's how they find success. And it was pretty cool to see it all come together and, obviously have our own success within that. And sometimes you look at each other and you think to yourself, man, this is just crazy to think that we would do something like this. But then it's the old Pep Guardiola saying is like once players start to see that it works and you start to see success within it, you start to believe in it. And I think that happened for us as well. We started to believe in it. And I love how you said being open-minded, Kev. Obviously, my congrats to you for now being on the other end of things and still winning trophies and adding to the trophy collection. I think one of my major questions for you, Kev, is not so much on the player sense, but more so on the coach's mindset on what do you look for beyond the talent within players? Because I think you're dealing with a lot of players and you have a lot of players under you that have an immense amount of talent. And most players, we hope that they are all hopefully at the similar level. And I think the levels, even for us as pros, it's very minimal to see, who might be better, who might be below or above. But what's one of the main things that you look for beyond the talent each and every day from every player that you work with?
So I have to say my own kind of like idea of how I would like to coach and what my team should look like and what players I value. It's based on all the experience that I had from other coaches, right? I had a coach that just walked the first time we had a meeting. He walked in and was quiet for 45 seconds and didn't say anything. Well, I was like, what's going on with him? And he was like, yeah, the first 45 seconds determine like how your relationship is going. So I decided to not do anything, but that's not me. That was weird. So, but if you look at Tata being open-minded, some other coaches I had along the way. I did my first presentation, and one of the biggest words that I have is commitment. Commitment, not just to like your talent that God gives you at times, right? Like when you look at Lionel Messi, it's special, some other players across the globe. But if you are committed, if you're motivated to come in and make an impact for 2 weeks, that might be all right. You might be fine for 2 weeks, maybe another 2 weeks. If you're not committed to put in the work on a day-to-day basis, no matter who you are, if you're roster player 1, 2, 3, or if you're roster player 14, 15, 16, I don't think that's what I would love from my players. Be committed from the start. When you roll up to the training facility, if you step foot on that field, you're committed. If it's a rondo, if it's a passing pattern, if it's a game where we play actually 11v11, if it's a small set of game, if there's no commitment in what I believe as a coach is right, what we as a club believe is right, if you're not committed to this type of things, I think you're not going to have so much success, right? Then the next thing is hard work, like I mentioned, dedication. Like nothing is just given. You have to earn it. And if you look at, thanks again, Greg, like for the championship that my team won, that our team won here, this team has been through a lot, right? Like if you look at the players that have been on this roster, they lost a teammate last year, an unbelievable goalkeeper, unbelievable human being that stood for so many core values that this club has. They lost a teammate last year. We announced to some of the players prior to the event if we retain them or not, but they still come in and are committed to work. And now they're part of a championship team, which opens so many more doors for them, playing or not playing, just being committed to your role within the team. And sometimes you're starting, but I have to say credit to all the players. There was not a single player on that roster that complained about anything in that Dallas event that we had to win the championship. Some guys played significant minutes throughout the year. We're very happy. You go into an event where all of a sudden I got some players down from the 17s, some players that have been challenged a little bit more throughout the year. And they're not complaining. None of them was complaining because they're committed to what we're trying to achieve as a team. So when I look at the players, yes, you should be upset if you don't play. You should be upset. I think it would be wrong if you're not upset because then you don't care. But if you care, you should be upset. The question is always, who do you want to be as a human being, right? Yeah, you can be the player that is upset, but it doesn't just determine the player. It also determines who you want to be as a human being. And one story I like to share is, I think it was my second year as a pro. We had preseason. Right before that preseason, the coach said, everybody starts at 0. And I was still very young. Like no one has earned anything from the previous years. So I was like, all right, let's go. I had an unbelievable preseason. I felt like I was one of the better players on the pitch throughout the training sessions, throughout the preseason friendlies. And then came the first game, and the coach that I had back then put the lineup up on the sheet, and I was sitting there right before the game, and my name was on the bench. But I thought, and talking to some other teammates, that I earned the starting position. And I wanted to get up and leave because I was so angry and still very young and so pissed. And then I had a guy, Thomas Stehle, next to me. Thomas Stehle, we called him the axe. We had an axe hanging over his locker because he was just tackling people. Right, that was him, but that was the way he was as a player. He was sitting next to me and he grabbed my leg and was like, "Bop, you sit down." And then he gave me that same conversation after. He said, "Kevin, you should be upset if you don't start, but it doesn't determine the player. It also determines the human that you want to be going forward and character." So being committed, hard work, whatever role you are in your team, starter, non-starter, roster player, I think is the best thing you can do to show, like to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, two things that stick out for me from that, those answers there is the resiliency, right? The resiliency that your team showed, and members of it. It's something that Greg and I talk all the time about, right? It was like everyone thinks that, whoever makes it pro is just full of, God-given talent, and they were meant to be pro, right? And those that weren't, it just wasn't meant to be for whatever reason. But they don't know that, like all of us that made it pro, we all had those moments where it could have gone the other way, but we stayed committed and we persevered through some challenges, but then also the fine lines. We talk about fine lines within everything, that fine line between being upset that you're not playing and pushing to play more, but still being supportive of the teammate that is playing, right? And it's very difficult. And we talk about the fine line between like a confidence and cocky as well. and how that's an important line to tinker with, right? Because you have to have that utmost confidence in order to be successful. But if you toe that line too far, right, you become a teammate that nobody really wants on their team. So yeah, two things that we talk a lot with our mentees about right there.
It's hard, isn't it? It's so hard to just accept that someone is saying right now you're not good enough. Right? Like if you look at, like, someone is saying you're not playing for XYZ reasons. And as coaches have to make tough decisions too. And if I could, I would play with 18 players, but I can't. And I have to make some decisions based on, sometimes on tactics, sometimes it's based on like fitness, injuries, whatever happened prior. But the best thing for me is when I can look over to the bench and I see guys on the bench that are actually willing to jump in and make an impact. If I look over to the side of the bench while 11 players are playing, and I see guys moaning and being angry and being pissed, I don't like, then I'm looking at myself, I'm like, should I put him in or not? But if you guys see that are supportive, clapping for good tackles, helping each other out in moments, even when someone gets fouled, just getting up and staying involved, like, this is what a good teammate is about. And then for me, it's like, it's easy to put those players in, right? If they're moaning and all of this, they might go in and play poorly too.
Yeah, so that goes into the decision making as a coach. You're looking down at the bench and who's looking like they're committed to the team and who's looking like they're having a pity party.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Since you have your coaching hat on right now, for youth coaches out there, how do you balance the tactical approach of teaching your kids tactics versus kind of giving them the freedom to figure things out on their own, but also having the freedom to, be themselves out there and do the things that make them special, or, have that uniqueness about them versus like the structure of a system, or, hey, this is the tactics and we have to stick to it, right? Is there a balance there? Do you sway one way or the other? Do you think one way's better?
I believe that like 60, 70 yards of the field have a lot of influence from the coach. The first 60 to 70 yards. The last 30 yards, in my opinion, is 98% the player. Like the attacking players, they need to be free. If they are not free and they can't be creative, then if you look at all the players, let's say Miguel Almiron, we were very fortunate to play with him. You told him to he went anywhere he wanted in the final third, and he just created something out of nowhere, right? Like that's so much creativity and talent. On the other side, I say some of the coaches that I work with, they went through a French course, which is supposedly a very, very high educated course. They do a lot of game situations where, as a coach, you have that one moment where the left back, let's talk to you, Greg, like your left back gets the ball and you open your hip and your first touch goes forward. And then you have your winger, your midfielders to play with. And I could predetermine the passes that you play. And I could structure it, like you say, and be like, okay, now the ball goes into the winger. He sets it back to the center mid. He plays it through to the fullback that overlaps, right? Those passing patterns that people do. This is good. I think it's needed to have a certain level of structure to give the guys options and be like, hey, look, and then also the technique of certain like exercises, certain passes, certain runs, timing. I think it's needed to do it unopposed. The problem becomes if all of a sudden it becomes opposed and you don't challenge the players to make decision in training, everything is programmed and the players might choose too many wrong times. And those French courses are like those French exercises. They stuck you into these positions over and over and over again, but with opponent. So you receive the ball over and over again. And then as coach, it's like, okay, look, here's your option 1. Here's your option 2. You slowly layer it a little bit in. Okay, your first option might be just the winger. Your second option might be the center mid. The third option might be the number 9. And if you can layer those information into the players over time, at some point, you, Greg, if you received the ball, you didn't have to think twice, right? Or you, Parky, when you had the ball, you knew option 1, 2, 3, 4 is there. But we're talking about former pros, where it's like, you have seen those situations so many times over and over again that you were able to make almost all the time the best decision possible. But young kids are still the brains is not as developed. They're not as experienced as we were, right? You look at them and they're like, how can you not see this? That's sometimes the issue that I have. Like, I see the solution so early because I've been in his shoes so many times. How can you not see this? But then a kid one time came around to me, coach, I just didn't see him. And I showed him on video afterwards, and he was like, oh, I don't know how I could not see him. So I think that's the challenge as coaches is, how can we give that little bit of structure to provide all those options that are possible, right? And even if it's the long ball over the top, everything needs to be fancy. Sometimes it is just a long ball to fix the problems that we have. But also within that, showing them all the options. But now we need to give them the opportunity to make their own decisions too. We can't just joystick. And I see myself sometimes joysticking a little bit too much because of our experience, right? And sometimes you see it from the outside so much easier because you're not in that moment. So for me, it's like, it's a fine balance. Like you say, I think there should be some structure where you show them all the options, but within those options, the players should still be able to make the decisions on their own. And the more decisions that they make in training, the more they will be successful when it comes to the game. A little bit more pressure, a little bit more intensity from the opponent. And now we're talking all the options that they have, and they just have to pick the right one. And young players will make mistakes, but I don't think we should punish them all the time. We look at modern society, it's all about likes and retweets. And so like, they're looking for someone who says something positive. I'm a big believer in the way I coach is in positive and encouraging environment. The players should make mistakes. Please do, because then I know you're thinking outside the box. I know what I need to work on, and I know what, like, you're trying. And if they never make mistakes, I don't know, you're not growing. You need to make mistakes to edge on, to grow. And that's why a little bit of structure, but also give them freedom to just play the beautiful game, because it always looks good on a PowerPoint presentation and a tactics board, but it's ultimately the players that play the game. It's a player's game still. So let them make the decision too. We just can provide guidance and options and all of this, but they are still playing it. We're just watching. Sadly, it hurts.
Kev, I love everything you said, man. You were like, for a moment there, you were like taking me back to my youth days in Portugal, and I was like, man, I just remember myself doing passing patterns and then transitioning into passing patterns against an opponent, right? And just kind of going there. And I love the fact that you said that, but because at the same time, right, we growing up and going into those phases, I feel like there was a certain level of expectation to still have those muscle memory moments transitioning into the next phase. So I just remember a lot of coaches in my youth career always telling me, if you don't know by now, then it's always too late. And just creating that muscle memory of knowing what pass you had in that position and the repetitiveness behind it. And so as you were explaining, man, you were taking me back to my youth days of just remembering those coaches saying those things and always building on from the very get-go. And that's something so interesting that you also implement within your coaching now within your coaching career. I guess we don't want to keep you too long. One of the main things for me, I'll ask you two questions in one. You can be quick with them if you want. What is your biggest pet peeve in players, and how do you get the best out of each and every player that you work with?
What was that first question? What is the biggest?
What is your biggest pet peeve? I don't know how to say it in German, dude.
It's like, what annoys you the most? The small thing
that annoys you. What's the small things that annoy you the most as a coach when you watch players?
Not trying and not listening. Like,
okay,
I can't stand it when players are not listening. You know, it just give me like 3 seconds. And if they're not trying, like if I see players having the opportunity to go 1v1 and they're not taking it, because I was never a good 1v1 player and I wish I was, but like I used to find the passes. Like sometimes I wish players would try more, you know.
So be more courageous.
Say again,
So be more courageous.
Yeah, exactly. Just go, like, have fun with it. That's the one thing that I told the players in the final. I said, this is your moment, guys. This is not me. This is not the cup. This is not what you did the last 3 years. Yes, it's all led up to this moment, but now you need to enjoy it. Be brave. Go out there and play the game like you're supposed to play it. Like, don't overthink everything. Right? Like people, oh, if I lose that ball here, or if I play this pass, no. Sometimes just play. And you could see, if you watch a U11, U12 game, usually the best players out there are the ones that are not worrying about what mom, dad, grandma, grandpa are yelling from the sideline. They're the ones that are just playing the game. And that's like, sometimes you miss that along the way when you get older. You're not just playing it like you're back 5 years old with your buddy or 7 years old with your friends, right? So what was the second question?
Second question is, how do you get the best out of your players?
I believe in making them feel valued in whatever way it is. So I like to go out there and have a laugh with them before practice because I miss the banter from the locker room. I don't have it anymore, right? So it's like, those minutes before training session, I think as a coach, it's so valuable. You can roll up 2 minutes before and just start the exercises, but where's that personal connection between the player and the coach, right? And in modern society with safe sport rules and all this, we have to be very mindful about what we say. But if you just go out there and make the kids put a smile on their face with like some kind of banter, a little bit of joke, I think it makes them feel valued and that you care. And that's the way I see it. And then I like to be positive and encouraging. Just go ahead, be brave, have fun, because there's so much to worry about. But once you step foot on the line, like over the line, I think you should just play. And I don't know if you, but I had some personal issues down the road in my career, like some family issues, whatever else there was, health issues within the families. But if I started playing soccer, I forgot about all those things. And if I have a coach that encourages me to do those things just based on feel and instinct and passion, I think that's the way I hope to get the best out of my players. Plus the detail of coaching, right? Like you can't just roll up and run a training session and only coach 2 or 3 players throughout that session. I feel like you should try to hit as many as possible without going bam, 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 bam. But you can talk to 2, 3 guys that you think that are like, maybe they just need a hug for a day, like they had a bad game. They just need to go to them before practice. Like just 2, 3 minutes. That's all there is. And then after practice, just grab 2, 3 more after practice, or grab them while they're together. I think some coaches just roll up, run the session, and leave. I think if you make the players feel valued in whatever they do, playing, not playing, you get the best out of them. That's the way I see it. You need to feel valued. If you don't feel valued, I don't know. It's weird. I don't like it.
The best coaches I had in my career did that to a T, man. So even when I played or if I didn't play, they always made sure everyone knew their role, their specific role, and how well they would feel valued on the field. And those 2 best teams that I played on were 2 championship teams, man. So
and that's the hardest thing as a coach, isn't it? Like to balance it, because that's what we say. People say it's manager. It's like, how can you manage the entire roster? And I'm pretty sure you've played for coaches too that manage the first 10, 12, 13 guys, but the other ones were so far away. And especially in a youth environment, I think in a pro environment, it's a little bit different because there's more on the line, like jobs on the line, clubs are on the line financially, and also like the own job of the coach. Where in a youth environment where you have 15 to 20 players on a roster, I don't see the players in like, oh, he's my best player, he's my worst player. I think you should never see it this way. You should say, okay, how can I help him? How can I help him? How can I help him? And whatever stage they are in their career, like you say, it's not just uphill. Sometimes they're in a little dip. And maybe all they need is to wrap armor on them and say, you're going to be all right. I've been there before. You just need to, stick with it, stick to the basics. And maybe that's all they need to hear for the next 2, 3, 4 days. But if you never value them, I think they will stick in that hole a little bit longer. And our job as coaches and mentors, like you guys, it's like, how can we get them out of those dips? And how can we make sure that the highs stay high and the lows, we can get them to the middle, right? And now we're talking, how can we balance them more out and make them more valued, more rounded for whatever they have ahead of them, right? Sports or no sports.
Along those lines, last question from me. Put your player hat back on. Most pressure you ever felt, whether it be a game, a trial, a moment within a game, most pressure. You remember it?
A game. Ingolstadt 2013-2014 season. Because that was like, it was positive pressure though.
Okay.
I have 2. I have one positive pressure, one negative pressure. Positive pressure was getting promoted into the Bundesliga. Because growing up in Germany, it was my dream. I just wanted to play 1 minute. That's all there was. 1 minute in the highest division in the Bundesliga. And when we got promoted at Ingolstadt, That was like going onto that field with that positive pressure. That was one. Worst one was in Munich, 2012. Played in the Allianz Arena against 1860 Munich, last game of the season, second Bundesliga. If we lost, we got relegated. If we win, we had a chance to stay in, but we still had to hope for other help. That was like where it was like negative pressure, because you know what it's like when you get relegated from a second division in Germany. A, you lose your job. B, the club most likely have to fold and run into financial issues. So there's not just me on the line. There was more. That was like the most negative pressure. We lost. We won, but got relegated. So it didn't help.
You have to make it back to your car alive.
Yeah, exactly, and make it home alive, because I got followed home a couple of times, but it's all right. It's passion.
I'm assuming you felt nervous before both of those games.
Yeah,
totally.
I still am nervous. I felt nervous as a coach.
It's more nervous coaching than it is playing.
It is, because you can't really affect it.
I have to help coach my kids, man. I'm more nervous watching their games than kids that are 9 years old rather than playing in front of 70,000 people, man. It's crazy.
I see it when my daughter's a cheerleader, and they have a 2 minute and 15 seconds or 2 minute and like little over 2 minutes performance. I'm more nervous watching her perform on stage than I am nervous hitting a free kick in front of 70,000 people. Honestly, like standing there, sweating.
Sure, for sure. Awesome.
Hey, by the way, that's my very, very last question. Better free kick taker, you or Almada?
He's so good though.
Come on, Kev.
He hits it much differently than you do, though. That's for sure.
I have to be humble, but he's so good. Like, no, I don't know. Different times. That's it. He's so.
I think I'll choose you. Just I don't know. I don't know if I figured out his like. I see you on top of a ball, and I feel like your technique is just masterclass. And his technique, I haven't figured out like what certain technique he uses and what kind of, it's like I watch I had the privilege to watch Juan Arango. I have played with Juan Arango, who has such an amazing technique, and your technique was like very similar, just a masterclass technique. And so I haven't figured out Thiago's yet, but amazing.
He's still young though. He still has some time.
You're very true.
He's so good though. Come on, let's give him some credit. But he didn't score 2 in one game yet. He didn't score 2 in my dad always says, Kevin, as long as they, like he hasn't scored 2 in a game yet. So once we get to that point, we can talk about it. Right. Plus for us, like, like if Atlanta wins another trophy, another championship, now we need to think about it. Until then, we're still all right.
Very true. Very true.
Still got the crown.
We still got it. We still got it.
Kev, thank you, man. This was awesome, man. We really appreciate it. Obviously, so much insight and so much input on what we're trying to achieve and help these kids understand. And coming from you, being on both sides of it and wearing both hats, like Parky said, gives a tremendous amount of information for each and every other coach, parent, and player, which is awesome.
Anytime.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me, guys. I think what you're trying to do is the right thing, right? Like, especially in a country where sometimes it's a business too, and it's needed that people have someone to talk to. It's needed. They need some help and guidance. And if we can do it, then we can grow this game with all the events that are coming up in this country. It's not just here, across the globe. It's just going to be even better for everyone involved.